Alright, we are recording for Chapter 18, the final numbered chapter for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Um, yeah, overall, I have to say I don't care much for this chapter for two key reasons. One is we get a memorial service in there, and it's just too damn wordy. I mean, I know what you're trying to say. You can say it in like half the words. Please say it in half the words. It's more effective and not a, this is just going on and on and on. Because I mean, it's like I said with Voyage Home as well, that those that are going to be receptive, you're going to bore. Those who are not receptive are just going to be frustrated. And those who are completely receptive to it are the smallest group. So, yeah. Also, just some of what they're actually talking about there is like, you don't understand how things actually work, do you? I'll get to that. But first, we have the actual, Kirk learning that he's safe. But we also do have this. The Klingon bird of prey was designed strictly for battle. The size of its crew and its interior were roughly 1/40th of that of the starship. It explains because the starship is designed for exploration instead. And it's like, okay, even with designing the bird of prey specifically for battle, which is also technically incorrect, it's a scout ship, a starship is still going to kick its ass. Because if nothing else, at that scale, 40 times larger, and also with a similarly larger crew, that demands far greater power capacity on it. Which means that's a lot more power that can be pumped into shields and weapons. You are not fighting one of those things alone and coming out the victor. I mean, it's like in Search for Spock, when Krug, he was relying on surprise by decloaking, and it's like he got tripped up. Chekhov caught something, then they're like, oh, we know they're there. But if the Enterprise hadn't been weakened as it was because of Khan, Krug would have been like the bird of prey would have been easily destroyed. There wasn't competition there. So Claw, also feeling that he could have directly challenged the Enterprise, is foolish. Is incredibly foolish. But yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just... So much of this is on the memorial that I'm reading this next highlight, and I'm trying to figure out what is the context of this highlight. But no, that's right. Because this is also... Yeah, this is also a too wordy. He should have done exactly that. This is Kirk thinking about how he should have just, once he got control of the ship, left. He should not have explored the planet. Should not have permitted himself to slip into the same self-delusion that had gripped his crew. If he had listened to his head instead of his instincts, the ship he had mistrusted at first but had served him so well would still be whole. Sybok would not have died in the depths of the tunnel. Spock, McCoy, his crew, all of them would still be alive. Boo-hoo! He had lost everything now, more than David and Carol. He had lost the Enterprise again, his crew, and the two closest friends. Couldn't you stop? We get it. He's brooding. I understand brooding. Yes, it does have you spiraling like that. The thing is, you can still do it in like 10 words and just repeat them. Okay? In fact, that's probably how I would have written this. Come up with those 10 words. I'm just using a number for 10. Those 10 words. Have it written out. And it's just very straightforward, to the point. Then repeat it. But like the same 10 words, but start changing their order. Do something like that. Or use some synonyms there. But it's the same 10 words. You do that because that's how brooding works. It's a spiral. It gets you caught like that. Instead, we get this just thing where it's like, oh, here's my problem, and here's my problem, here's my problem, here's my problem. Where it's just growing like this. It's like, stop it. I'm sorry. I find it obnoxious where it's like, I find it obnoxious when it's like, these are my friends. These are what I use to write with. Stop it. I don't read these, I read stories. I'm not reading dictionaries, I'm not reading thesaurus. Stop using them. Stop using them as your guides. Yes, use them when it's like, because I mean, I'll admit, I have to look up synonyms sometimes where it's like, I am writing something and realized I'm repeating a word that I don't want to repeat. Generally speaking, I think repetition is a bad idea. Let me finish my point, then I'll come back. Come back to the exception that I already gave, but I want to be specific there. So I'll go to a synonym, so that way I'm avoiding the repetition there. Even though the point is the same, I'm avoiding that repetition. I don't want words repeated. But, like I just said with brooding, I would repeat the words, because in that context, that is a worthy exception. And I have done that where it'll be word for word repeating. But there's a reason for that. It is because I'm trying to emphasize this specific point. And so I'm doing that. And maybe it is to build somebody up. Maybe it's to tear somebody down. Whatever it is, it's still doing that for a specific purpose. This doesn't feel like it has a specific purpose here, not here or later. This seems more just, oh, you really, really, really need to feel bad. It's like, no, I would feel bad the moment you tell me this. Okay, I don't need more. It's also the whole I know the movie, so I know Kirk's safe here. And it's like, there is that issue as well. But it's just, he feels bad. Leave it at that. Okay? And like, he feels bad because, to his mind, the Enterprise has been destroyed. So he's failed in his mission, and he's lost his friends. That's all. We don't need more than that. We don't need the whole... the ship he had mistrusted at first, but had served him so well. We don't need that. He lost his ship. That's enough. We don't need the mistrust, and we don't need, oh, it proved itself in the... We don't need that. Just, he lost his ship. We've read the book up to this point. We know his feelings towards the ship. You don't need to repeat it. Also, Sybok would not have died. I don't know why he necessarily cares about Sybok being alive or not. At least not in the same breath of Spock, McCoy, his crew. I mean, technically it's not the same breath, it's the next sentence, but it still is. Sybok is just somebody he met like a day ago. And a guy who was his antagonist. He did not like Sybok. Why is he now like, oh, it's such a shame? I mean, yes, he did die to save him, but it still is, why are you elevating him this much? Kirk. Specifically Kirk. That doesn't make sense. So, yeah, too many words. Some of them not entirely appropriate. I don't want to say inappropriate. Because there's nothing wrong with mourning Sybok on its own. But this feels like Sybok is elevated to be equal to the crew. And Sybok is not. Kirk should never consider him as that. But he is somebody worth mourning for what his final act was. Absolutely. I'm just trying to think. Would there be a good example from the original series? Would that work? Well, no, because he's actually closer to her. I'm just trying to think of examples in the original series where somebody that he just met dies for his benefit. But that's still, it's not on the same level as Spock or McCoy dying. So, or her and Scotty and Chekhov, it's not on the same level. And that's, yeah. Anyway, so then he's brought up to the bridge, and he's even thinking when getting there, well, I'm gonna die, might as well die well, even by Klingon standards, so once I see the captain, I'm just gonna charge him to attack, they'll kill me, cool, fine, I went out fighting. But when he gets there, it's like, what the hell is Cord doing here? It's just mentally, but it's like, and he's standing a lot straighter and prouder than I've seen him at all. Again, only having seen him for one day. I mean, in theory, he knew Ford's history, but still is, like, personally only met him actually once. Yeah, because it's only when trying to rescue him as a hostage that they met. They would have had some interactions then, but then that was it. They never crossed paths after that. Still, Cord can just have an air of confidence that he did not have before, so it's like, okay, Cord is here, so apparently they rescued him before that. But then he's like, why is the captain standing next to him? Who's in the command seat? And then we see it's Spock, who's in the gunner's rig. It's like, and we get this. Jim gasped, Spock. The Vulcan unstrapped himself, from what appeared to be a custom-designed gunner's rig and rose with consummate dignity. Welcome aboard, Captain. Beneath Spock's total restraint, Jim perceived the faintest glint of smugness. And I'm going to come back to it. Sorry about that. I just felt the sudden need to cough. Sorry. Why do we need a custom-designed gunner's rig? We already know that. That was mentioned many chapters ago. I get Kirk doesn't know that. I get that. But it could just be a gunner's rig. That's it. We don't need custom-made gunner's rig. Just gunner's rig. Because we know that. The reader knows that. I understand Kirk doesn't know it, but still is... We can skip that. That he just recognizes it's a gunner's rig, moving on. It's a style thing. I get it. But I'm still going to and so I typically try not to be too judgmental on style differences, because it's just style. But it's still, I am going to be critical of it here because it is an unnecessary repetition that I know myself, I don't like unnecessary repetition in stories, as I've already tried to explain, and I don't think I'm that unique with that. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe that is something people like repetition. I don't. And it's like the whole custom-made guns, the settlers, handmade guns, the crap. I've been trying. One word that came to mind that it would be correct: rudely made guns. They're rude guns. It's like, or crude actually also would. I think maybe that is what they say. I get it, but you introduced it once. We don't need to repeat it over and over again, and it just even here. But it's also, we get zero explanation for why Spock is there. None. And also why he is at the gunners thing. I mean, if anything, if Cord is like, we're going to give command of this to Captain Spock of the Federation. For one thing, how the hell did Cord convince a Klingon to allow that? Because you'd think it would be, I know you're General Cord, but bing. I mean, it's like, you're dead. I mean, there's no way this makes sense. But it does allow Kirk to then realize that, oh, I'm okay. But it's also, you have a legendary gunner. Well, maybe he isn't legendary, but the greatest living gunner in the Klingon Empire right there. And there is still a gunnery station, so why would it not be Spock is in the center seat and he's the gunner? Why not? Because it would be far more respectful to him, and it's also... mainly it is just it would be far more respectful to Claw. But still, it makes no sense, and there's no explanation for this either. He's just there. Spock is just there, and it annoys me. It greatly annoys me. Because that you need an explanation. You need one, and it's totally absent. Then we also have this, so it's like we're done there, and then it's damned inappropriate, McCoy thought as he stood on the forward deck and gazed through the window at the planet where Sybok had met his death. A reception was in full swing on the observation deck. McCoy didn't quite understand it. I'm okay with the reception. I didn't highlight it because of that. I highlighted it because why are they still near the planet? The thing wanted to get on the ship. We don't know how it might have been able to. It is mysteriously powerful. Why don't we leave? Why don't we leave the area and then we can have the reception? That seems very appropriate and wise. I mean, it wasn't described that the thing was destroyed, so get out. Maybe because it's earlier in the day, but I am feeling hot here. It just, what the hell are we doing? But anyway, he is uncomfortable with the reception because, like, Sybok just died. But it is this whole, yeah, but we're celebrating that the hostages have been rescued. Claw is here, and it's, a way to try to ameliorate him not getting the victory he wanted. So technically not getting the honor he wanted. So it's a way that, no, we're celebrating you as well. So it is also a kind of political game there to mess with him. Positively, but still messing with him. And it was, by the way, the three dignitaries that suggested it. So I do understand that, why it's awkward. I do also understand why they're doing it. Yeah. We also get this, though, because Spock is there, and even Kirk later, when we get to him, is actually surprised Spock is there, because he wasn't ordered to, and he figured he'd be mourning privately for Sybok. But he is there, and McCoy comes up and tries to comfort him, and initially, like, he had a plan and what he'd say, he gets in and says something completely different, pointing out that it occurred to McCoy, has it occurred to you as well? Well, it's occurring to McCoy now. The Great Barrier wasn't put there to keep us out, but to keep that thing in. Like, had you thought of this? Spock did not look at him. It has occurred to me. Well, McCoy said, trying rather inanely, he thought, to say something comforting, to make the best of a perfectly rotten situation. Doesn't that imply the existence of a greater power? Actually, once he said it, it made some sense. Spock turned from his contemplation to face McCoy. I will say this much, Doctor. We have yet to reach the final frontier. I like that line there. We have yet to reach the final frontier. I'm good with that. Some of the rest of this, though, I find a little stupid. Not so much the idea that, maybe it was there to imprison him, which I have actually seen. There are some novels that I think technically would be classified as fanfiction. They might be authorized, but are still only memory beta kind of stuff, which, well, technically this is, but this is higher than that, that suggest this thing, the Gorgon, and there's a third being as well, I just don't remember what it is, are, like, these super powerful beings that, like, came into the galaxy from a different dimension, and that there's also a barrier around the galaxy itself that's keeping out another one. It gets kind of weird, and some of that is, why are we doing this? I don't know why. That, by the way, I will acknowledge, is part of the reason why I don't intend to go into, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek, the extended universe kind of stuff. I mean, technically this would be counted under that, but because of its direct connection to the film, which is canon, I accept these novelizations, the Star Wars ones as well. But once you start opening it up for anyone to write, it starts falling into my criticism in general of fanfiction, which is, well, kind of a counterpart to the criticism. Which my criticism just, I've said it before, but maybe somebody is watching this. Yeah, somebody watching this? That hasn't heard me explain that before. If you have a good idea for a story, don't connect it to somebody else's. Write it yourself so it will stand on its own. Because you don't, if you're just connecting it to somebody else, it's like writing fan fiction for Star Trek, then you're also restricted to whatever somebody else decides. Make it your own story, give it your own setting, do all that yourself. If it's truly a good idea, it's worthy of that. I should also add this qualifier that obviously if you get a license to do it, that's different, like Dillard did, Vonda McIntyre did as well. That's different. But also, there should not be, I do not believe there would be any limitation. Like, if you want to just write a story because you have an idea for one, and it's just for you, or maybe just for your friends, fanfiction is perfectly fair there. But I mean, like, something that you would actually put out into the world, I would say, no, try to make it your own story, so that you're not reliant on somebody else. So, but anyway, so relating to this is that idea of, you know, like, these beings are actually far more powerful, and there's this great barrier around the galaxy itself that's keeping another one from getting in, and like the Q, who a continuum, is also connected with this, as far as like trying to keep it just gets weird. That would kind of relate to my criticism on fan fiction, in that could be something where this is just somebody else's story that, yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me for Star Trek. That's my opinion, and I've not read the story, I've just read about it. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And it's like, maybe it's they had an idea for a story that maybe it would have been maybe it is a good story, but best told not as a Star Trek story. That's another reason why I feel with fan fiction, because you start latching on there and it's like your idea might be good on its own, but not in this context as well. So, yeah, it's yeah. But there's sorry, and getting more specifically to what's actually written here, doesn't that imply the existence of a greater power? To be fair, this thing was not that powerful. It couldn't leave the surface of the planet, couldn't cross the Great Barrier, and when it twice attacked people, all it did was knock them down and probably broke one of Kirk's ribs. I mean, true, it beat the shit out of the shuttlecraft, but it's still really not that impressive. I mean, like, Kirk was outrunning it, even. And like, climbing up the side of a mountain, which actually should have been a hill, not a mountain, but in any case. I'm like, for the scale, these things, no, they're hills. But regardless, it's still not that impressive. Yeah. And I guess there would also then be the Great Barrier isn't really it is keeping people out, so it cannot escape via somebody else. I'm saying, yeah, it's keeping him in, but it's almost like, putting a fence, like you have somebody, yeah, I guess that would be a way to put it. It would be like you have some of the worst criminals or the absolute worst serial killer on Alcatraz, which is itself an island, but then it's cut off there and he can't get off the island. But then you also put fencing up around the entire San Francisco Bay so that even if he somehow had the means to, which would require somebody coming in through the fence, that then he can't get back. It's like, he's already isolated there. You've already imprisoned him. This other thing is to keep people out. But anyway. Oh yeah, then that stuff. So getting back to the whole very wordy stuff, but in this case with this it's kind of late stage Cold War kind of mentality that's stupid in my opinion. Who's it that's talking here? It is Talbot talking to Cord. Oh wait, no, he came over and is talking to Spock and McCoy. Cord also makes some rounds and we follow him for a bit, but he's talking about how basically they are going to, the three dignitaries are going to try to honor Cybok's life and death. Well, they're going to make sure that they are honored, and they're going to work together to try to improve things on Nimbus. Okay, good idea. We also get this. Perhaps someday in the not-so-distant future, there will be peace among our people. Perhaps we can help Cybok's vision of paradise to become a reality. Couple things there. Let me give the shorter one first. Because one is like a larger complaint that I have, large criticism I have for a lot of this chapter. Get to that one second. First, it occurred to me when it was written here is let's actually go with the idea that Cybok's goal was indeed just achieving universal peace. It's like, okay, if we actually stop and consider that, he was trying to shortcut it. He believed that he could find, the god of Shakari, he believed that he could find that, and that then that being alone would allow galactic peace to be achieved. In other words, he gave himself a mission to achieve peace with minimal work to it. That's not how peace works. Okay, certainly not in the larger context of these three powers. Whereas these three dignitaries, they're basically saying, we're going to put the work in. It's like, yes, that has a better chance of producing something lasting than what Cybok was hoping for. But it's part of the reason why is like that shortcut wouldn't have worked is all it would take would be the Klingons, for example, just be like, no. I mean, technically, it came about later, but technically, in Deep Space Nine tells us that part of the Klingon creation myth is they killed their own gods. So the Klingons would be like, I mean, you can't be that powerful. You already believe we killed you, so go away. It's like, why would we go for peace? But it is, there is largely, and I'm just checking. Okay, there's a little bit of it there as well. This like, it seems like late Cold War mentality that all you need for peace is to stop fighting. And it's like, that's not actually how it works. Because very often there's a cause behind the fights. There's a reason for the battles, the competition there. And with the Cold War, I mean, it's very obvious there, though it does seem a lot of people forgot it. You had Western civilization versus communism. You had a civilization that had a culture of life, liberty, freedom, so that everyone was equal and everyone could. I mean, true, we weren't always great at it, but it still is having that view there. Those were the ideals. We didn't always do a great job of achieving them, but we did it. Those were the ideals. That was the culture, and trying to achieve that and allowing people to achieve as much as they can. Versus communism, that by its nature is divisive. Right? I mean, that is the nature of it, because it divides people down from those who must do the work that will support others and those who decide what work must be done. Right? It's like you might think that, oh, well, but everyone is equal there, except that the commissar, whoever it is that's deciding, okay, here's how much bread you deserve in a day to feed you, who's ever deciding that has power over the people he's giving bread to. So it does inherently divide, because it's now the person who works to grow the wheat you need for the bread, the person who makes the bread, they aren't the ones that have any power over their own food supply. They're producing the food, but it's not theirs. It's the commissars. That's who's making this. So it is intrinsically divisive, while Western civilization tries to reject that. That no, you grew the wheat. That is yours. You get to choose what you do with that. You can use it yourself to make bread, or you can sell it to a baker who might be better at making bread than you are. Then you can buy the bread from them. Or maybe it's part of a barter thing where, hey, I'll give you the wheat, you give me some bread. And then the baker stores enough to sell it. And that's all something that they are free to do because they're equals there. You don't have that with communism. So the battles there are in part going to be from that. The Klingons, the Federation, and the Romulans all have dramatically different cultures. You can't be like, oh, well, if we just stop fighting, that then there'll be peace. That's not how it works. Because when their cultures are so misaligned from each other, one has to ultimately be dominant over the others. Right? There has to be some way to say, no, what you are doing in your culture is wrong, one side or the other. Obviously, I would align with the Federation, because the Federation is always presented as that. But it still is, there would have to be that effort there for battles within the culture, so that one is supreme over the others, at least as far as the fundamental values, and then the others have to adopt those, just assimilate that, so then it can all work together, and then maybe you stop having fights. But it's still the idea that, oh, if we just stop fighting, that's not how it works. There's a cause beneath the fights. Fights do not exist just to exist, okay? Except for, like sports, but that's different. Like actual wars and such, those that disrupt peace, there's a reason behind those battles. And this just felt very strongly like that late Cold War mentality that it's, if we just don't fight, hey, there's peace. But there's also the issue, going back to the cultural supremacy stuff I was just saying, and I know I'm not saying this very well, but I think I've explained this before. I don't remember. I am not anti-war. I am pro-peace. And those are very different. Because an anti-war mentality, which is kind of what's being described here, and goes to the cultural supremacy concept, an anti-war mentality is basically saying that we will never go to war. And so you start surrendering things because, oh, well, war is so much worse. That's not how it works. Because that means you are surrendering. You are giving up. The only reason that war is not happening is because you apparently don't value anything enough to preserve it, to keep it. Just trying to think, what would be these things? Let's say you had somebody who was completely a pacifist, would never, ever fight for themselves, completely that. Well, what do you do then if you're a man and somebody comes and decides, I'm going to take your wife from you? Are you not going to fight for them? fight to stop that? Are you not going to do anything to interfere? Now, if you're a pure pacifist, if you're completely anti-war, you would have to give up your wife. You'd have to allow any harm to come to her. You would also have to allow any harm to come to you. Most people aren't going to tolerate that, though. Okay? Most people are not. And that's part of the reason. And it feels like it's just if we all disagree to stop, then there's no bad actors. There's no one that would ever disagree with me. It's like, no. There are disagreements. And that's also one thing that has been a problem for decades, even. And not just a like late Cold War kind of thing. And even then, it was present in the middle of the Cold War. I just feel like you see more of it taking on cultural significance in the late 80s when this would have been from, and early 90s. But there is a bad tendency, it seems, in Western culture today to believe that that Western culture is dominant throughout the world, such that everyone understands and agrees with our fundamental values. And that's not true. There are many people that don't, and will take advantage of those Western values to achieve their own ends, and then destroy Western values because they were only a means to their ends, not what they actually believed in. And that's why I was saying about cultural dominance, supremacy kind of stuff, is you need to say, no, the culture has a value to it. I must protect it. And this just, yeah. There's another aspect to it. And hang on, let me just... Yeah, so this one highlight here actually kind of relates to it. Okay. So Cord has gone over to Claw, and Vixis is staying there as well to talk with them. But where was the victory? Claw asked so softly that only Cord and Vixis could hear. There was no battle. A victory for peace, Cord said, reminded again of Sybok, endures longer than any gained through bloodshed. Think of this, Claw. Sometimes there is more glory to be found in life than in death. If you had killed James Kirk, you would have achieved fame within our empire for a generation, then been forgotten. But now your name will be known not only to Klingons but to Romulans as well, and to all intelligent species within the Federation, and to their children and their children's children. And they will remember you with gratitude, even more so if you assist us in making Nimbus a success. Claw sipped his drink and savored it, and the glowing vision conjured by Cord's words. You are a very shrewd opponent, General, and very quick to understand another's psychology. It is a quality I can appreciate. I also appreciate the fact that it is your brother-in-law who will make the final decision as to my promotion. True, Cord said with feigned innocence. Claw smiled with the admiration of one brilliant strategist for another. But I will consider what you have said, Cord. It has the ring of common sense. That ring of common sense is what I mean. It is what's being spoken here is as though Claw agrees with and understands the more Federation mentality that Cord himself is also demonstrating here. And it just... Also, this idea of victory for peace endures longer than any gained through bloodshed. One problem there is a war is fought to win a peace. And I'm sorry, but that is a reality that people do also forget here. It's like D-Day was a victory for peace because it brought us closer to peace. There was much bloodshed there, but it brought us closer to peace. But it also, the whole endures longer than any gained through bloodshed. And one thought that came to me, and again, this is a cultural thing, and it's a historical thing as well, that I do believe a lot of people, especially in America, forget and aren't necessarily taught. And it has to do with slavery. That some want you to believe that slavery is inherent to the system, and it isn't. That is not. But it has been present for a very long time. It also, to be clear, abolitionists are a very modern phenomenon. Slavery is incredibly old. It's changed forms greatly, but is incredibly old. But coming back to the point. For a long time, for the 77 years ago, when Lincoln started talking, those who wished to abolish slavery recognized you could not do it by just a pen. You could not just say, even as president, even as Congress, you cannot just say slavery is illegal now. The reason is because it would create animosity. Well, there would be animosity on both sides, the former slave owners and the former slaves. And so they tried various things to correct that, such things as they did, in fact, when some slaves were freed, tried basically giving them a colony to let them develop there, because the hope was after so many generations the animosity would die away, and so you could have a unification then. Didn't really work. But it was still, they recognized it was a cultural battle. Those that were abolitionists had to work to convince everyone that slavery was wrong, was a great evil, so that then it is not that we are telling you need to free your slaves. It is, you will simply recognize that I must free my slaves because it is wrong to keep them enslaved. That was the goal, to just have the culture itself reach the point of rejecting slavery willfully instead of requiring it by law and forcing it. Civil War greatly changed that. And it's also a little funny because technically the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free slaves. Yeah, it's a specific technicality that from that point on, with the Emancipation Proclamation, every time that the North won a victory that would rescue slaves, they were then free. But all the slaves prior to that were still slaves. It had no impact on them. Those that were freed by the North, and also technically slaves that existed in the Union. Because there were, as I recall, there was still slavery in some of the Union states, but they were with the Union, not with the Confederacy. I'd have to check on that. But, no, that did not end slavery. But it's still, as I was saying, it was meant to be a cultural victory to have slavery be rejected, not a military one. But the issue got forced, and, well, we then had the Civil War. And fortunately, the North did win. But it's part of the reason why was to have that enduring victory, that slavery would just be so rejected that it would all be gotten rid of. And so the slave owner, at least, would not have animosity towards slaves, because they would have to recognize that, no, by owning the slave, I was wrong. That my action was the evil one. Freeing them was the right one, or rather recognizing their freedom, since people should simply exist as free. Anyhow, had another typo here that I had to highlight just to remember. Instead of her, we get hen. That is absolutely an OCR kind of typo. Okay, and that is actually where we get to the end. But yeah, it's just the whole thing. This whole chapter just felt so manufactured, with a lot of that late stage Cold War kind of thing. That if we just give up fighting, that ends. That's not how. It's not how it works. And the funny thing is, it's never really worked that way. I was like, mutually assured destruction does actually work, guys. It just, so much of it in there, so wordy. And it's also like, I don't think Claw would have been convinced. And it's also, it just makes no sense Spock being there as well. But Claw, I think, would more so just be begrudgingly accepting this. That he has to obey Cord. That Cord did express dominance by, that whole thing in the previous chapter. And it's like, so Claw just needs to accept that and deal with it moving on. That's fair. And this is all begrudging, but not like, So there's a ring of common sense. It's like, yeah, it just does make me worried a little bit more so about Undiscovered Country, but we'll see. Because, I'm just running through in my mind some of that, because that the movie does a much better job of presenting where that end of conflict there, but it wasn't achieved easily. It was very difficult, and it's not even like that was I'm losing it, but the conference that they were holding, the meeting that they were holding on Kittimer, That's not the Khitomer of the Khitomer Accords. That was just the first of many negotiations between the Federation and the Klingon Empire that ultimately led to the Khitomer Accords. This would make it sound like, oh, well, because, we... The way this is written would be like, oh, well, because we're now talking, that must mean that there will be pieces. No, that's not. But it's also that idea of giving up your hatred, your anger in Undiscovered Country is important, because that's when you can start listening and start seeing ways that the cultures can align, can work together, or at minimum just be preserved. Because like going back to Search for Spock, Krug's whole thing was just protecting the Klingon Empire and protecting their culture. That was it. That was his whole motivation, and it's actually a fine motivation. It works very well, and he's not really as much a bad guy as it could be presented otherwise. It's like that was good, and it is also kind of funny because it's one of those things that it only makes sense from the Federation point of view that it would be like, but we don't want to change your culture. I mean, yeah, sure, we don't want to be at war with you, and maybe tone down some of the warlike stuff, but we have no interest in changing your culture. Why would we do that? But the Klingons don't understand that. And it's not really explained why, other than just it might be propaganda to maintain a war footing there, so. But Undiscovered Country, especially at the end, you've restored the faith of my father, and you've restored my sons. It's like, that's not the final step. It's just a significant step towards the final one, because there is something here of value. There's something that we both value here. So we should strive for that. But it is still there's going to be butting of heads. There's going to be conflict. So I can probably stop talking now. Long enough video. Sorry about that cough earlier. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't make myself seem too much an idiot with this, but whatever. If I am an idiot, I'm an idiot. I'm going to keep going. Because, hey, what better way is there to stop being an idiot than to read? See you next time.